Welcome to Forest Chat, where we talk about individual endeavour in Western Australia, what it takes, what it means, and how you do it. I'm your host, Paul Vandermeer, and in today's episode, we're talking with Dan Gardiner about inline skating and fundraising. Dan started inline skating over 30 years ago when he used his sister's inline skates to get ready for ice hockey and found that he enjoyed the inline skating a lot. Welcome to Forest Chat, Dan.
Thanks, Paul. It's great to be here.
Great to have you here, Dan. We used to meet in the early hours, at least briefly, around Optus Stadium. You've spent a lot of time there. The first question I'll ask, Dan, is what is inline skating?
Yeah, it's a good question, Paul. You probably know it better as rollerblading. So it's rollerblades, and I originally used those as transport, and just got sort of more and more hooked on the feeling of skating over the years. It was 30 years ago that I first started. And yeah, look, back then the skates weren't great. They weren't all that comfortable, but I wasn't doing long distances then. But over the years, I've sort of got better and better at it and have progressed my skating career quite far now.
What are the arrangements around inline skating from an organisational perspective? Are there like clubs and
There
teams
is
and
there is
competitions?
now. We're very lucky in Perth to have a group called Perth Outdoor Rollerblading, and that group started up about 7 or 8 years ago. And I've been in that group since the start. It's a very, very supportive skating community. There's hundreds of us in the group, but there's dozens that will regularly skate. And we have organised skates almost every day of the week, weather permitting. So there's all sorts of people there that do all sorts of different skating, from urban street skating to skate parks. And then you've got people like myself that do long distance skating. So yeah, we're very lucky. It's a great group, and yeah, I think we're about to turn 9.
9. Wow. That's that stage. You're just growing up and getting to be understanding what life is all about and having dreams for what can happen into the future and that sort of thing. So must be exciting times.
Oh, it is. It's really good. Like I said, it's a supportive group, and we do a lot of skate outreach, I guess, for want of a better word. So there's a particular session we do on Mondays at Optus Stadium where we have dozens and dozens of spare sets of skates, and the public that just happen to be walking along can come and try them out, and there'll be people there that can support them and help them learning how to skate. And we do kids sessions. There's a kids group there that have a little racetrack one of our members sets up, and they just have a great time. It's a really good environment.
And quite a decent sized community as well. So that sounds
Yeah, it
terrific.
can be. We're now in the middle of winter, so the sessions get a little bit smaller. It's quite cold out there. But, the die-hard skaters, we never stop.
Rain, hail, or shine.
Sometimes, yeah. It's hard work skating in the rain.
All
It can
right.
be very dangerous. You're pushing off to the side when you skate, so in the wet, it gets very slippery. But it can be done. The hardest part is cleaning your skates afterwards.
They get full of grime, I would imagine. So the type of surface that you use, Optus has got the beautiful concrete, smooth concourse around it. Where else
Well,
do you
that's
skate?
inside the stadium. I've never skated there. I'm hoping to later this year. But look, we're very lucky in Perth. We literally have hundreds of kilometres of cycle paths, beautiful cycle paths. And they go all the way down the freeway, all along the major highways. And, there are so many places you can go on skates. If you're a long distance skater, this would have to be one of the best cities in the world for it. We are very, very lucky. So I can do a skate for, over 200 kilometres and not cover the same ground twice.
That's incredible, isn't it? Just the distances that you can go.
Yeah, well, we are very lucky. I mean, I started off just skating around the river. So I probably started doing my longer skates maybe 16, 15, 16 years ago. And back then, like a long skate for me would have been 20 kilometers. I'd never really done anything more than that. I remember when I did my first 50-kilometer skate, I came home and I was so excited. Oh my God, I've skated 50 kilometers. I can't believe it. And I consider that to be fairly long distance. And for me, it was back at the time. But since then, I've progressed a lot further. And so instead of just doing laps around the river, there's many more places we can go. The POR, the Perth Outdoor Rollerblading Group, they'll do skates that start at perhaps Cottesloe or Fremantle, and then they might skate to Guildford and then back to Fremantle. So that'll be like a facilitated 80 to 100-kilometer skate.
That's pretty incredible, and that'd probably be a group skate.
That's a group skate. So they will do a skate like that every now and then, and they will make it attainable for people that perhaps haven't done very long skates to do them. So they'll do it over a longer period of time. They'll have lots of breaks. They'll be stopping for food multiple times to make it easy for people to reach 100 kilometres.
It sounds like a cycling group on skates.
Yeah, it is. That's exactly what it's like. Just a supportive group of people helping each other out and doing something that they all love doing.
Dan, what does it take you to be an inline skater?
Skating is something that I'm very passionate about and have been for a long time now. There's nothing like the feeling of, knowing that you have the freedom to put on your skates and all the equipment that I need and then head out and do a long distance skate. So like I said before, when I first started doing it, I wasn't experienced in doing long skates. And when I did my first, I think it was 100-kilometer skate, I wasn't prepared for it. It was just something that happened on the day. And I had water with me, but I had no food, I had no money, I had, more importantly, no bus pass, and I got myself in a bit of trouble at about the 50-kilometre mark. But by then I was 50 kilometres out of Perth, and so I had no way of getting back. I had to skate back, and by the time I got back home, I was in quite a bad way. That's a tough lesson to learn, but ever since that time, I've made sure that I'm very prepared. So every time I skate, I carry my tools with me so I can maintain my skates if required. I carry lots of food, energy gels, fruit, electrolyte tablets, lots of water. You've got to be prepared when you're doing this sort of skating. You need good equipment. I always wear a helmet. I've got very good lighting. I do a lot of skating at night, so I've got very good lighting. And yeah, you just got to make sure that all this equipment is maintained and as high quality as possible.
I imagine that the boots, inline skates themselves, need to be very comfortable as well.
They do. There's many different types of skating and many different types of skates. So the skates that I use are called marathon skates. So they look a little bit different to your typical sort of recreational skate. They're a little lower cut. They've got comfortable padding inside them. They've got very long frames and large wheels, so they're good for long distance and high speeds. And the skates that I'm currently using, I spent a fair bit of money on them and sort of bought all the components separately and built them to exactly what I wanted. And yeah, they have done really, really well. I did a 12-hour skate in those, and then the year later I did a 24-hour skate non-stop, and I had no foot pain from being in the skates that amount of time. I had pain everywhere else, but my feet were fine.
It's interesting. You were telling me before the recording started about you knew exactly where the pain was.
Yeah, so last year for Telethon, I did a 24-hour skate. And I wanted to do a 24-hour skate for many, many years. There's a big event in France at Le Mans, the Le Mans racetrack, and it's actually happening next week. And they do a 24-hour skate. And I'd always wanted to do it, but heading to France is a bit out of reach. So I ended up doing a 24-hour skate at Optus Stadium. And I started at 3 o'clock on the Saturday afternoon, and the plan was to finish 3 o'clock on the Sunday and skate as far as I could in that time. And the first thing to start hurting was my left knee about 6.5 hours in. So by then I've done about 130 kilometers, 120, 130 Ks. And the last thing to start hurting was about 7 hours later. And I think it was my right shoulder. And I remember very vividly that it was my body that was not hurting. And then all of a sudden, the whole body is in agony. So after that point, you don't need to worry about pain anymore because it's just going to constantly be there. And nothing else can hurt. From then on, it's down to mental strength, I guess, to keep you going.
That's the endurance mindset, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. I built up endurance skating over a long time. Like I said, I'd start with a 50K skate and then did my first 100K skate. And while a 100K skate, it's never easy. It does get easier. And there's been a big progression in my long skates over the years. I can now do them much, much, much faster than I could when I started. And I don't need to take many breaks. So when I first started doing 100 kilometer skates, I would have to stop, say, for 20 minutes or 30 minutes at about the 60 kilometer mark and take a break. Whereas I don't need to do that anymore. When I did telethon last year, I skated for the first 12 hours non-stop. I didn't take a single break. And by then I had skated 240 kilometers. So, I mean, that was a big effort. And that came with a lot of planning. The strategy to do that was quite involved and detailed. And I had talked about it with others, including some world record holders in cycling and ultra endurance running. So they helped. And then in the final 12 hours of that skate, I stopped for a total of 22 minutes. So 24 hours of solid skating, 22 minutes of breaks. Yeah, it was a good strategy. It worked really, really well. And I was lucky that, although the body was in a lot of pain, it held out and I was able to do it. And I reached a total of 461 kilometers in that time.
That's a really incredible achievement. And you mentioned about having the help of some other world record holders. We have interviewed one of those guys on this podcast not so long ago, Phil Gore.
Get out of here. He's the guy that helped me. The guy is yes. Amazing. He got the world record again last week or the week before over at Dagcow. So he's got the backyard ultra record again.
Yeah, that's right. I interviewed him before he went there.
Oh, fantastic.
And, he was on his way there.
Well, look, his help was invaluable. So I met with him and I met with a woman named Sabine Bird, who had a world record for 24-hour cycling. And I met with them in the weeks before the event. And talking to them changed everything about my event. Before I met them, I'd been planning on doing it the same way I did the 12-hour skate the year before, which was, done pretty casually, I guess. For the 12-hour skate, I had breaks whenever I wanted to. I'd stop and talk to people. Every time I saw a friend or family around the stadium, I'd stop and have a chat. I didn't plan my food and my nutrition very well. Well, I did, but I wasn't hungry, so I decided to stop eating at about the 4-hour mark, and I didn't really eat much again. And so, when you're doing a 24-hour event or, a 4 or 5 day event like the events that Phil does, you can't do that. You need to keep your energy levels up, and you need to continue eating regardless of whether you want to or not. So I got some good advice from these people, good advice about pacing and strategy. And yeah, look, Phil and Sabine don't know it yet, but I'll be leaning on them again for this year's telethon skate, which is coming up in a few months.
Interesting to hear about that skate you've got coming up as well. We'll talk about that a little bit later, though. You've covered a good number of things there, Dan, about perseverance getting through the pain of what you're doing. You talk a little bit about planning as well, and also you talk about gathering other people's experience. And you talk about having great equipment. Is there anything else that it takes you to actually do your
Yeah,
inline
look,
skating?
it certainly is. And I guess for an event like the 24-hour skate, as I mentioned, it was for telethon. And the reason I chose telethon is they're a charity that resonate very strongly with me and have done for many years now. So we all grew up, seeing the telethon weekend fundraisers every year. But several years ago, about 6 years ago, my oldest son was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. And so that changed his life quite dramatically in a number of ways. But, we received a lot of help from the hospital and the Type 1 Family Centre and other beneficiaries of telethon. And I'd always wanted to give back. It had always been in the back of my mind to give back to the people that helped us and helped so many others. Well, we have family and friends who have children that have benefited from the work done by telethon or the fundraising. And so I thought, what can I do to give back? And then I thought, well, I'm good at skating. I'm good at skating a long way. So why not turn that into a fundraising event? So I contacted Telethon and they were very, very excited to hear about it for the first time back in 2023. And the event snowballed. It just got bigger and bigger. When I first thought about it, all I wanted to do was skate. But it became so much more than that, and so many people got involved. But I guess to get back to your question, when I'm going through this 24-hour skate, I leaned very, very heavily on the reasons why I was doing it because it hurt a lot. I was in severe pain, and it would have been so easy to stop. And I had a big support crew. They wouldn't have cared if I stopped, and Telethon wouldn't have cared if I stopped, and my wife probably would have been happy if I stopped. But then I was thinking, the families with these sick children, they have to keep going. They don't get to stop. They would love to stop and take a break, but they don't get to do that. So why should I? I don't get to stop either. I'll keep going because they have to keep going. So that's the sort of thing that I leaned on. Probably one of the hardest points in the skate was from 4 o'clock to 6 o'clock in the morning. The body was in 100% pain, and I hit a bit of a mental low. And I had a skater friend with me for 18 hours of the event. He was still with me. We had other cyclists and sport skaters, but by then I didn't really want to talk to anyone. I was just sort of keeping my head down and trying to put one foot in front of the other. And yeah, it was thinking about the reasons why I was doing it that got me through those low points. And I've been thinking about it. I've sort of been visualizing the event for weeks and months beforehand. So when I was thinking these thoughts, I had thought them all before. So nothing really seemed like it was new to me at the time. I felt like I'd been there and I knew how to get through it. I guess you could say it was like what's the word? Like a creative visualization process. Yeah, I've constantly been thinking about how I would feel and how I would get through those low moments. And when they happened, I drew on that. But it was challenging. It was very, very, very difficult.
So you had a real motivation there and it was internally
It,
driven.
it was. I was incredibly motivated for this event, as I mentioned, for the reason of telethon. But I also like to set myself pretty challenging personal goals. And I've set many skating goals over the years. The first time I skated 100 kilometers around Optus Stadium, I mean, that's 88 laps of the stadium. It's pretty boring. There's not much to see. But I did it, And when I did the 12-hour skate, that was 240 kilometers around the stadium. It's they're just crazy goals. The goal for this year is to do 1,000 kilometers. So once again for telethon, and that's in the planning stages. But that'll be about 3 days, 3 solid days of skating. And so I'm in the planning and thinking process for that.
That's an impressive goal to be aiming for, Dan. Quite amazing, really.
Yeah, look, it may be a bridge too far. We'll see how we go. I do need to talk to Bill to see how he does his multi-day runs. I've discussed it with him before, and there's another Perth-based ultra endurance runner that will hopefully be able to assist. I mean, it'll be a completely different sort of strategy than the 24-hour skate. I was able to get through that with minimal rest and no sleeping, whereas over 3 days, things will need to be done very, very differently.
Phil will be the master of running for days on end with tiny little bits of snippets of sleep.
He's incredible.
We've had a pretty good talk about what it takes you to do your inline skating. After the break, we'll have a look at what it means. We've heard what it takes, Dan, to inline skate. Now, let's have a look at what it means. Dan, what does it mean to you, your family, or the community that you are able to inline skate?
Yeah, I never really thought about that too much in the years that I was skating. And then, like I mentioned earlier, I came up with the idea to have this fundraising charity skate for telethon. And I mean, the plan was just to skate, this is in 2023, to skate for 12 hours around the stadium. But as I mentioned earlier, this event snowballed and became way bigger than I had ever anticipated, to the point that I needed an event manager because it meant so much to so many people. So it means a lot to telethon, as I mentioned. They were very excited about this event. They hadn't had someone doing anything quite like this before, and they wanted to know more about it. And further, they wanted to know how they could support me to make the event bigger. So, we did a lot of sponsorship and raised a lot of money. We ended up raising over $24,000 for telethon in that first year. And the whole Perth Outdoor Rollerblading group got behind this event. They were all so very supportive. And I think probably they were quite proud that, one of the skaters from their group was doing this charity event.
They also had a pretty sizable input into the actual running of that 12 hours, didn't they?
Yeah, there was a lot of support that I received from POR and from family and friends. So, we had a base at Optus Stadium. We had someone there with a massage table, and we had skaters and cyclists keep company. For the 24-hour skate last year, it was done very, very differently, and it was a lot more structured. So I had, people had basically lists that they had to, every hour I had written down on a list what I needed to keep me going, to try and maintain energy levels and motivation for 24 hours. I had a list of mantras that I printed out, and one of my skating friends followed me around, sort of reading these mantras out to me that was supposed to be motivating me. And that was the plan at the time. But I think this was about 22 hours into it, and I was pretty tired. And, I said to him, look, I know this is great. What you're doing is really helping, but I've pretty much had enough now, you know. But one of the ones in particular was forward is a pace. And, no matter how slow you're going, just keep going forward and you'll reach your goals. So, yeah, look, I couldn't do that event without the support and, more than that, the love of all my skating family and my friends and my family as well. One of the greatest parts of the 24-hour skate was at about 1:30 in the morning. And we had contacted an electric scooter company and they gave us 6 electric scooters to support our event so I could have people with me and they could bring me food and water, etc. But I turned around at 1:30 in the morning. I was at the back of Optus Stadium and they're following behind me were on 4 electric scooters, my 2 sons and their 2 girlfriends. And I had no idea that they were going to be there at 1:30 in the morning. And it was just a really, really beautiful moment. It was lovely to see them there, to come down so early in the morning to support their father doing his crazy 24-hour skate. And then my beautiful wife who had gone home, and I wasn't expecting to see her until the next morning. And then I think she turned up at about 2:30 or 3 with hash browns from Hungry Jack's. I mean, it was just that's exactly what I needed. I needed to see her, but the hash browns. I mean, it was just she'd gone home. She couldn't sleep. She was thinking about this event, so she came back down.
It really did engage a lot of people.
Yeah, look, it did, and it also inspired a lot of people. And it was never my intention to be someone that inspires others. That wasn't really the goal behind it, and I never thought that would happen, but it did in a few different ways. There was a woman over in Melbourne a couple of months ago who did a 200 kilometer skate. A friend told me about, and I was just so thrilled to hear this. So I sent her a message on Strava. I found her and sent her a message telling her how proud I was of her because I know how hard it is. And she replied, "Well, when I was doing my 200 kilometer skate, I was thinking of you doing your 24-hour skate and how hard it was for you. And that was the motivation that kept me going." And then I had someone at work who was going through something quite difficult in their life. And they said, "Look, I sort of leaned on your event and what you went through because I know that you'd been in a lot of physical and mental pain and you pushed through it and you kept on going. And I sort of drew on that to keep me going through my challenge." So that was really great to hear, but it wasn't something that I had intended on happening. So I guess the event, I guess it meant more to people than I had initially thought about. The initial thinking was just, I'm going to go and do a skate. 12 hours, 24 hours, whatever it is. I'm good at it. I'm going to do it. But yeah, it became bigger than that.
And what does your family think about you doing these events?
I think they're quite used to it by now. I've been going out and doing skating at all hours of the day for many, many years. When I did the 12-hour skate, I said to my family, and I also said to the Channel 7 interviewer who interviewed me during that event, that I'm never doing this again. And then 12 months later, there I was doing a 24-hour skate. And my wife sort of raised an eyebrow, but she understood the reasons why I was doing it. And I think they're quite proud, of what I've accomplished. And the same interviewer from Channel 7 came down that second year and he's like, "Didn't you tell me you weren't doing this again?" I'm like, "Yeah, I know, but I'm a glutton for punishment."
With a good
Oh,
reason.
absolutely. It is a good reason. And, another reason that I want to do it again is I don't know if I've reached my limits yet. I think I can go further. Yeah, the 24 hours hurt, but what are the limits? How far can I push myself physically and mentally? I think I can go further. And this time I want to raise a lot more money for telethon. So that's one of the goals is to get a different sort of sponsorship. We're going to go for corporate sponsorship this year, and that's in the planning stages at the moment. So we're hoping to raise a lot more money for telethon this year. If I'm going to do a 3-day skate, I want to get a lot of money.
It's always good to have good goals as well.
Yeah, you've got to have goals. Goal setting has always been a very important part of my life. Ever since I was very young, setting and achieving goals, and it's more than just having goals. It's great to have a goal, but then you've got to have a plan. How are you going to achieve your goals? Just having a goal is not enough, and so that's where the planning and all the preparation comes into place. And for the 24-hour skate, yeah, look, I had a plan, and I remember my event manager. We had two-way radios, and he jumped onto the two-way, and after the first hour, he said, "Look, you're skating too fast. I've looked at your plan, and you're supposed to be skating 3 kilometers an hour slower than you're currently doing." And I'm like, "Okay, well, yeah, that's true, but I'm feeling pretty good. And I've got these scooters, and I've tucked in behind a scooter, so they were breaking the wind for me. And so I felt like I could keep going without expending too much energy." And so, yeah, look, the plan did change over the 24 hours. I did learn a valuable lesson with nutrition. You always hear runners and cyclists and endurance athletes say, don't ever try something for the first time on the day of the race. And I did that. And it was a particular food item. And I had built it into my strategy. And when I had the very first one, I'm like, this is absolutely revolting. And I can't eat anymore. Just sort of come up with a new nutritional plan on the fly, which, it worked out in the end. But I learned some lessons along the way.
That's incredible, isn't it? How you think things are going to be just like this, but when you actually give them a go, they don't turn out anything like what you
Yeah, that's right.
expected.
Look, you never know what's going to happen on the day. I had trained and I had planned, but anything could happen. Anything could happen, and sometimes you can't be prepared for those things. I could have fallen over. I could have hit a rock, something on the ground. You hit those things the wrong way when you're on inline skates, and sometimes you can fall. And if you have a bad enough fall, then you can be in a bit of trouble. So there's a bit of luck involved as well.
For sure. You talk about having bigger wheels on the inline skates. How big are we talking?
Well, they're called 125s. They're 125 millimeters in diameter. So that's basically the largest kind of wheel you can get for inline skates. So they're quite fast, but the problem with these wheels, and this is something that I mentioned to a lot of other skaters when they start doing long distance skating, is because it's a bigger wheel, you're higher up off the ground, and it puts a bit more pressure on your ankles and your feet. And when you get tired or fatigued after skating for many hours, if you put your foot down a fraction of a centimeter incorrectly, then you can fall. And this is something that happens when you're tired. So there was a bit of a risk involved, and I was aware of that when I was doing the 24-hour skate, that that this could be a problem in the later hours of the skate when I'm exhausted and I'm not paying attention to what I'm doing. So it's definitely something that's in the back of my mind for the next skate. And I may need to wear some different forms of protection, because I suspect that if I skate for 3 days, I will at some stage fall. And so when I skate, I always wear a helmet and I always wear wrist guards. And I'm not too worried if I fall and hurt my knees on a regular skate. But if I do that on a 3-day skate, it's going to be a problem. And so, yeah, that's something that I need to start thinking about. But yeah, that all comes down to the size of the wheel. Like I said, there's pros and cons to everything. They're a fast wheel, they're great for long distances, but they can be a bit tricky at times.
Different handling techniques, and if you hit something, it would be something just a little bit bigger that will be required to trip you up,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
would
you
imagine,
can,
at that
with
point.
those larger diameter wheels, you can roll over quite a lot of the bumps and the things that would be more uncomfortable on a smaller diameter wheel. But I mean, I have been at Optus in the past and done laps, and there's these tiny little stones at Optus. I mean, you can almost barely see them, but I've hit one of those before, and it caused me to hit the ground quite hard. It resulted in a trip to hospital, unfortunately, and I was off the skates for a while. So, there's hazards out there. You need to be aware of them. That's why I've got really good lighting for our nighttime skates, so I can see as much as possible on the path in front of me.
The dark makes such a big difference. And we're doing this interview in the middle of winter, effectively. We've just gone past the winter
Yeah.
solstice, so there's quite a lot of
Oh,
dark
look,
around.
nighttime skating. It's my favourite. It's my favourite time to skate. My favourite place to skate is there's a relatively new cycle path up the Tonkin Highway that heads to Mouchet. So when I do the Mouchet skate, it's a 120 kilometre skate. It's 60 kilometres from my house out along the Tonkin Highway to Mouchet, and then 60 kilometres back. And I like to time it so that when I leave the roadhouse at Mouchet, heading back to Perth, the sun has already set. And I've then got about 25 kilometres along this beautiful cycle path before I get to Ellenbrook. And there's no street lights. It's pitch black. There's no one else on the path. There's the occasional road train that comes past on the highway, but it's just a beautiful, beautiful time to skate. It's very peaceful, and I'd like to say, it's there's a thing called flow, and that's where I have my flow. That's where I'm in the zone. It's what keeps me going. It's what I really, really love. That particular skate and that time.
Flow is definitely an extremely good place to be.
Yeah,
We've talked about flow a number of times on this
yeah. People
podcast.
say, what's the attraction with skating? Why do you love it so much? And that's what it is. It's like a feeling of freedom. When you're in the zone, it's probably the closest thing to perhaps flying. When you're still on the ground, there's nothing like it. It's absolutely wonderful.
And that's all the reason you need to be out there.
Yeah, yeah. That's what keeps me going. I've been doing it for a long time now, and I hope to be doing it for many decades into the future. I know some people that are probably close to their 70s. This one guy here, and he still does very, very long skates. 100-kilometer skates. I find him to be inspirational. He's in Finland right now doing an event called Finline, where they skate across Finland for a week, and he does this every year, and it's just, yeah, I find it inspiring. What other people can do when we get a new skater and they say to me, "Look, I've done my first 30-kilometer skate," and then they'll qualify that by saying, "Oh, that's nothing compared to what you've done," but that doesn't matter. That's huge for you. You've never done this before, and you're setting goals to do longer skates, and you're meeting them, and that's absolutely wonderful. So I get inspired by the things that other people achieve, setting their goals, and I like to give them encouragement and motivation when I can. It's great to be able to do that.
It certainly is. We've heard a lot about what it means that Dan can inline skate. We'll have a break, and after the break, we'll have a look at how you do it. We've had a look at what it means that Dan can inline skate. Now, let's have a look at how to do it. Dan, if someone was going to take up inline skating, what would you suggest that they do?
In terms of how to do it, it's quite simple. You buy skates and you start skating. So there's a few places where you can buy skates in Perth, but coming along to one of the events that Perth Outdoor Rollerblading holds on Mondays is probably one of the easiest and best ways of doing it, because we've got free skates there, and more than that, we've got experienced skaters that can support beginners. So we get people walking past that have never skated before, and they see all these dozens of people skating around and all the skates lined up on the ground, and they're naturally curious. So they ask what's going on, and then within 5 minutes, quite often they've put a pair of skates on for the very first time, and they're being supported by an experienced skater and led out onto the concrete to give it a go. Some of these people come back and some of them go on to buy their own skates and have joined the group and have become quite talented skaters. I've also had people ask me over the years, how do you do what you do? How can we get to do what you do? I mean, you're doing these long skates and I do them quite quickly. I can skate 100 Ks or 150 Ks at a reasonably decent pace. So how can we get to do that? And these are people that can already skate. And my answer is always the same. I said it comes down to a couple of things. It comes down to spending a lot of time on your skates, but it comes down to setting yourself the goal of something that you want to achieve and then going out there and doing it. My goal in the beginning was when I wanted to start long distance skating was to do 100 kilometers. And that took a lot of hard work. Then my goals changed. I was like, okay, well, now I want to do 100 kilometers, but I want to do it faster. I want to do it as quick as I can. Now, I have a particular goal, which I have not set yet, and that is to do 100 kilometers in under 4 hours. So that'll be maintaining an average pace of over 25 kilometers an hour. And the closest I've ever come is 4 hours and 9 minutes, which was a couple of years ago. So I don't know if I'm going to achieve that goal. Probably getting a bit too old for that one now. But yeah, in terms of how I do it, I guess I have a single-minded focus. When I'm out there skating with a particular goal in mind, then I'm going to do everything I can to try and achieve that goal. Some skates, I'm just out there and it's casual. I'm just cruising around and just enjoying the freedom and the feeling of skating. But most of the time when I'm skating, I'm working as hard as I can, and that has the added benefit of building up strength and stamina, which makes further skates easier. So I guess that's how I'd answer how do you do it in terms of starting skating and also doing the things that I do. But it's taken a long time, a lot of effort, and yeah, having equipment that you can rely on is very important as well. And learning from your mistakes. I've made mistakes over the years. I've mentioned a couple of them earlier. Not making the same mistakes twice. I'm sure there's still plenty of mistakes left to make, but yeah, learning from your mistakes.
Sounds like it's actually really easy to get started. And like anything, if you want to go a long way, it takes a bit of dedication and effort to make it
Yeah,
happen.
yeah. I don't know how easy it is to get started. Kids seem to find it easier than adults. They're quite often skating pretty quickly. They tend to have a little less fear than those of us that are a bit older. But getting out there and giving it a go, I mean, we get all sorts of people getting out there and just giving it a go. And that's what it's about. You've got to try new things. When you get opportunities like that, it's great to give it a go.
Absolutely. You talked about what's next being your 1,000 kilometre target skate over probably 3 days or so. When's that due to happen?
Possibly October this year. I mean, I still haven't found a venue. There's a lot of planning that needs to go into this one. Telethon's in October. So once again, this will be a skate to raise money for a telethon. And this year I will do it before the actual telethon weekend. Every other telethon skate that I've done has been on the telethon weekend. And then I've been taken back to the arena for an interview, and I've been quite tired and in large amounts of pain and haven't been able to enjoy the party that they put on afterwards. And I really would like to do that this year, is have some fun at the telethon party. So I will very likely do the event in the weeks leading up to telethon. But we will have weather issues. It's if I'm doing it outside, it'll be quite windy and there'll possibly be rain. I don't know if I could handle that for 3 days. We'll see how we go. There's a lot to think about. But once again, this event like this will to come down to pacing. I'll need to sort of have a strategy and make sure I don't get too carried away in the early hours.
Yes, working the plan, knowing what the plan is, and pacing it out so that you can actually sustain it. That's probably the trickiest part
Yeah,
of it, I would
that's
imagine.
exactly right. It was hard work when I did the 12-hour skate. I had a friend come down about 3 hours into it, and he is an ex-world champion speed skater. So he is a very, very accomplished skater. And so we ended up doing some quite fast laps. I mean, I'm nowhere near the level of skater he is. I just sort of hack along. I have a lot of strength and stamina, and I can keep going for many, many hours. But when I was with him, yeah, we were probably going a little bit too quick. And then I'm like, well, look, you get to stop now, mate, but I've still got 8 more hours. So I really need to take things easy. I didn't do last year when I had the 24-hour skate. It was, like I said, I had my strategy, and I mostly stuck to it, and I didn't go out too hard. I didn't do any silly things that would come back to bite me later on. And look, in the last hours of that skate, in the very last hour, I still had the ability to skate incredibly quickly at the back of the stadium. When I had a tailwind, I was able to absolutely fly. So it ended up being a very, very good skate.
Well done. Thank you very much, Dan, for being on Forest.chat. All Forest.chat listeners wish you the best with your
Yeah,
future
thanks, Paul.
endeavours.
Thanks very much for inviting me to talk. It's been great to be here.
It's been fantastic having you on the show, Dan. You've been listening to Forest.chat, where we talk about individual endeavour in Western Australia, what it takes, what it means, and how you do it. I'm your host, Paul Vandermeer, and in today's episode, we talked with Dan Gardiner about inline skating and fundraising. Remember, there are 4 ways to get involved with Forest.chat. Share the domain Forest.chat with your friends and family and people that you meet. Listen to the episodes at forest.chat/episodes. If you do something interesting, book an interview at forest.chat/interview. If you want to support a local business, book an advert at forest.chat/advert. I'm looking forward to joining you with our next episode. Until then, enjoy making it happen.